He's all seen it. He walks away like it never mattered. Posts the smiles, flirts in public, maybe even dates someone new before the dust settles. And for a moment, you wonder if you were the only one who felt anything real. You ask yourself, how can he move on so fast? But here's the truth that most people miss. The louder he performs his moving on, the more likely it is that something inside him is still holding on. Silence isn't just the absence of noise. It's the space where truth surfaces unfiltered, unmasked, and unavoidable. You don't need to chase answers or compete with his highlight reel. Just be still. Because while he can fake moving on for the world to see, it's your silence that will make him face what he can't hide, that his heart is still tied to what he lost. It's one of the most confusing experiences you can go through after a breakup, watching someone who once held your heart act like it never even mattered. You see him smiling, laughing, maybe even dating someone else. He seems so unaffected, as if everything between you was just a chapter he was more than happy to close. And you're left there thinking, how is he doing this so easily? Was it ever real? But what you have to understand is this: the way someone performs their detachment doesn't always reflect the truth of their emotional state. Some people move on loudly. They want to be seen, to appear free, unbothered, and full of life. They post the selfies, the nights out, the flirtations. They become extra active, even over the top, like they're on some kind of post-breakup high. But often that's not healing, that's hiding. That's what it looks like when someone is trying to outpace their feelings, when they're sprinting away from emotional discomfort rather than sitting with it. They're not over you, they're overwhelmed by the silence you've left behind. See, when someone is truly at peace with something ending, they don't need to advertise it. They don't need to show you or anyone else how fine they are. They just are. Healing is quiet. Real acceptance doesn't seek validation, and it doesn't perform. So when you see him moving on with fireworks and fanfare, it's not proof that he doesn't care. It might be the loudest cry for reassurance he's ever made. Reassurance that he's okay, even if deep down he's not. And you're the one being silent. You're not reaching out. You're not asking for closure. You're not checking his stories or chasing his attention. That silence, your stillness, has weight. It carries power because it confronts him with something he can't control: your absence. He can control how he looks to the outside world. He can pick what he posts, who he talks to, and how loudly he laughs. But he can't control what happens when the show is over and the noise fades. He can't stop himself from noticing that you're not watching anymore. You're not giving him your energy, you're not present. And suddenly he realizes he can't feel you anymore. And that terrifies him more than he's willing to admit. We're wired to seek comfort, especially after we lose something meaningful. But not everyone knows how to sit in pain and process it. Not everyone has the courage to admit that they still feel the connection, that the relationship mattered. For some men, ego steps in. Instead of mourning, they perform. They try to prove that they've moved on before they've actually done the work to let go. They replace reflection with distraction, substance with spectacle. But deep inside, the bond hasn't broken. It's buried, and it takes your silence to bring it to the surface. He might expect you to react, to message him, to get jealous, to chase him, just a little. When you don't, he's left wondering, why isn't she fighting for me? Why does she seem so okay? The irony is, your silence is doing to him what he tried to do to you. Make him question whether any of it was real. And that quiet will echo louder in his heart than any word you could ever say. Because silence isn't empty. It's full of presence. It's full of reflection. It forces a person to sit with themselves. And when someone is truly emotionally attached, even if they're trying to suppress it, silence activates those feelings. He might tell himself he's over you. He might say he's better off. But when the distractions fade and the world goes quiet, your memory rushes in. He thinks about the way you made him feel, the comfort of your presence, the things left unsaid. That emotional residue doesn't just disappear because he's pretending it's not there. Real attachment doesn't vanish when a relationship ends, especially if it ended without proper closure or emotional resolution. And emotional attachment has a way of revealing itself in the quiet moments, in the late night scrolls, the dreams he doesn't tell anyone about, the memories triggered by a random song. You won't always see it, but he'll feel it. And no number of new faces or staged smiles can shield him from that truth. So don't confuse his performance for peace. Don't assume that his noise means he's healed. Sometimes the loudest people are the ones running from the deepest pain. And your silence, your refusal to play the same emotional game, becomes the very thing that forces him to face what he's been trying to escape. You're not losing by being silent. You're not weak for not reacting. You're simply choosing self-respect over chaos. And that will always have a greater impact than any impulsive response. Because when someone truly has to face the silence, when they feel the distance you've created, they finally have to ask themselves the hard question. If I've really moved on, why do I still feel her in the quiet? And that's the moment the performance ends and the truth begins. When you go silent, he may misread it at first. He might think you're bitter, that you're playing a game, that you're trying to get a reaction or punish him for how things ended. But the truth is far from that. Your silence isn't an attack. It's not revenge, it's reflection, a space you've created for healing, clarity, and dignity. And that space, although misunderstood by many, speaks volumes, especially to someone who secretly hasn't moved on. Silence is often mistaken for weakness. People assume that the one who walks away without a fight, without the dramatic goodbye, without the desperate plea, is the one who cared less. But real strength doesn't need a stage. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is say nothing. Not because you don't have words, but because none of them would bring you peace. You're not looking for a reaction, you're creating room for revelation. See, silence strips away the noise. It pulls back the curtain. When you stop reaching out, stop explaining, stop defending your worth, it forces the other person to confront the void you left behind. And that's when the truth begins to rise to the surface. Not because you forced it, but because silence creates space for reality to breathe. It's in that quiet that he realizes what your presence really meant. We live in a world where people fear the pause, where being unavailable, unbothered, or simply quiet makes others uncomfortable, especially someone who's used to having access to you. He might have expected you to linger, to hang on to hope, to keep showing up in small ways, a like, a comment, a message at midnight. But your silence? That's a statement. It tells him that you've shifted from seeking answers to seeking peace. And that shift is unsettling for someone who still hasn't found either. Your silence is not coldness, it's clarity. It's the moment you stop begging someone to understand your value and start honoring it yourself. It's you choosing stillness over chaos, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. You're not trying to prove a point, you're protecting your peace. peace. And the moment he realizes that, it stings. Not because you've hurt him, but because he can no longer deny how much your presence anchored him, even if he never said it out loud. And here's what's even more powerful. When you go quiet, you shift the emotional burden back onto him. He no longer has your words to hide behind. He can't use your reactions to justify his own behavior. All he has is silence. And that silence holds up a mirror. He starts to ask himself questions he avoided when you were still speaking. Did I take her for granted? Was she the one who actually cared? Did I lose something rare? And those questions don't just sit, they echo. He may try to silence those echoes with distractions. He may post, party, pretend. But deep down, he knows the difference between noise and connection. He knows what it felt like when he could hear your voice, even in disagreement. And now, there's nothing. No more emotional lifeline, no more safety net. That silence, to him, becomes louder than any words you could have ever said. What you have to remember is this: your silence is not passive, it's intentional. You're not just disappearing, you're detaching. You're not rejecting him, you're reflecting on what's best for you. And that kind of energy is magnetic. When someone realizes that you're no longer emotionally entangled, no longer needing closure or conversation to validate your worth, that's when the real power dynamic shifts. Because now he has to fill the space where you once stood. And if he still feels emotionally connected, that space becomes unbearable. You're not ignoring him to manipulate him. You're not punishing him with absence. You're reclaiming your energy. That's the difference. Silence born from self-respect isn't cruel. It's necessary. It's how you rise when words have been exhausted. It's how you rebuild when explanations only lead to more confusion. It's how you let go when clinging only drags you down. And here's the part most women don't realize until much later. Your silence gives him the opportunity to face himself, not the version of himself he shows to the world, but the one who knows exactly what he lost. The one who might have acted like he didn't care, but who now lies awake, wondering why you haven't texted, why you're not checking in, why you're not responding to the bait he keeps throwing out there. Because you're not playing anymore. You're healing. You're evolving. And he knows he no longer has access to the same version of you he once did. There's a point where silence becomes sacred, where it's no longer about him at all. It's about you, your peace, your future, your boundaries. And once you find that space within yourself, the loudest cry from anyone else won't shake you, because silence gave you something more valuable than closure. It gave you clarity. So the next time you feel the urge to break the silence just to prove you're still worthy or still hurt or still human, pause. Remind yourself that your silence isn't about proving anything to him. It's about proving to yourself that your healing matters more than his confusion, that your reflection holds more value than his validation. And in that sacred quiet, you'll find what he may never reach, real peace. You might look at him now and think, he's fine, he's moved on. He's already with someone else. He must have never cared. But let's talk about something most people don't realize. Behavior can lie. Healing doesn't show up in how fast someone moves on. It shows up in whether or not they've actually faced their emotion. And there's a huge difference between replacing and releasing. A man can go on 10 dates, travel to new cities, throw himself into work, or post pictures with someone new and still be emotionally tied to you. Why? Because emotional bonds don't break through action alone. They break through reflection, accountability, acceptance, and real healing. None of that happens when someone is avoiding their feelings. It's easy to distract yourself. It's easy to get attention. It's easy to find a warm body next to you and call it comfort. But when you've truly had a connection with someone, when there was emotional depth, trust, intimacy, that doesn't just disappear because someone's pretending it's gone. That kind of bond leaves residue. And that residue doesn't get washed away by rebound relationships or good lighting on Instagram. What he might not admit to anyone, maybe not even himself, is that part of him is still emotionally connected. Not because he hasn't moved on in the physical sense, but because he hasn't let go internally. He hasn't taken the time to unpack what went wrong, to grieve the loss, or to sit with the uncomfortable truth that you mattered more than he was ready to admit. And because he's skipping that inner work, your silence triggers the very thing he's trying to outrun. You see, he can fake detachment, but he can't fake peace. And peace doesn't come from sleeping next to someone new. It comes from doing the work to forgive, to grow, and to let go. That work takes time. It takes self-awareness, and frankly, it takes courage. Not everyone is brave enough to go inward. That's why they perform on the outside, the parties, the new flings, the sudden glow up. It's all a distraction from the fact that he's still emotionally stuck. Healing is a quiet process. It doesn't beg for attention. It doesn't need to be seen. And because you're silent, because you've chosen stillness and distance instead of drama and reaction, he's now left with himself. That's where the real tension begins, because once the noise fades, he has to face what he lost. And if he's still attached, even a small memory of you, your laugh, your touch, your silence, will hit harder than any goodbye ever could. So don't be fooled by behavior. Don't let the surface make you question the depth of what you had. If you know it was real, trust that. Because no one, no matter how strong their performance, escapes the weight of unresolved emotion. He may not show it, he may not say it. But emotional attachment doesn't break when someone leaves your life. It breaks when someone finally chooses to heal. And if he hasn't done that, then you haven't left his heart. He's just buried you under distractions, hoping time will do what inspection never will. When someone pulls away, ignores you, or tries to show off how much they've moved on, the natural instinct is to react, to respond, to show them they don't have control over your emotions. Maybe you feel tempted to call them out, to post something back, or even reach out just to see if they still care. But here's the truth, most people don't tell you. The real power isn't in your reaction, it's in your restraint. It takes almost no strength to react. That's what people do when they're emotional, uncertain, or triggered. Reaction is instant, it's impulsive, and in the heat of that moment, it might feel like taking your power back, but often it's just giving it away. Because when someone knows they can still get a response from you, they know they still have access to your energy, whether it's love, frustration, or sadness, any reaction says, you still matter enough to move me. And that's the very validation they may be fishing for. Restraint, on the other hand, is rare. It's deliberate. It's choosing silence over chaos, composure over confrontation, peace over proving your point. And that kind of strength doesn't just protect your dignity, it shifts the dynamic entirely. Because when you stop reacting, you stop feeding the cycle. You stop giving them control over your emotions, and that's when the balance of power begins to change. He might test you. He might post something provocative. He might show up in small, confusing ways. A message that says nothing meaningful, a story he knows you'll see, a breadcrumb of attention. Why? Because he wants to see if he still matters, if you'll still respond, if you're still on the hook. And the moment you don't bite, the moment you stay calm and centered in your silence, that's when he starts to feel the shift. He expected you to react, to show that he could still get to you. But instead, you stayed silent, you stayed focused, you stayed grounded. That's not indifference, that's emotional maturity. And whether he admits it or not, it's powerful, because now he has to wonder, why isn't she affected? Why isn't she trying? Did I lose her for real? That uncertainty is far more impactful than any word you could have said. You're not being cold. You're not being manipulative. You're just choosing not to play emotional ping pong anymore. You're choosing self-respect. And that restraint doesn't just protect your peace, it commands his attention. Because when someone who once cared stops reacting, it's no longer about ego, it becomes about loss. Real, irreversible loss. And that hits much deeper than any emotional outburst ever could. So if you feel like staying silent makes you weak, think again. Silence is strength when it's grounded in clarity. When you choose not to respond, not out of fear, but out of confidence, you're telling the world, I don't need to prove my worth. I already know it. And that kind of self-assurance is magnetic. It's powerful. It's unforgettable. You don't have to raise your voice to be heard. Sometimes it's the one who doesn't react that ends up being remembered the most.